Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome all of you out here on the first day of spring. Also notice that there'll be a full moon tonight, which is the last full moon that coincides with the spring equinox for quite a few years. So take a look at that later. But what I'd like to talk about tonight is a zoning bylaw amendment that will be coming up at the June 10th special town meeting. And this bylaw has to do with the marijuana enterprise zoning bylaw for the town of Ayer. What I'll do is go through the slides, and I will take questions after each slide. So I'll go through the points on each slide, and then if anybody has any questions about those particular items, I will take those in turn. So first of all, why is the town proposing this bylaw? Well, you may recall that back in November of 2016, there was a ballot question in front of all Massachusetts voters, question 4. And the result of that question was that the people of the Commonwealth voted to approve, legalize, you could say, the use of recreational marijuana in the state. Ayer was one of those towns that voted yes on the question. And as a result of that vote, the state put together what's called the Cannabis Control Commission to develop regulations and develop procedures for the issuance of licenses for all types of marijuana establishments, not just for retail that we would commonly think of. Now, towns can limit the number of retail establishments to no fewer than 20% of the number of alcoholic beverage licenses in the town, or one such establishment, whichever is fewer, or whichever, down to one. And this action was actually ratified at the October 23rd, 2017 special town meeting over at the high school. So there's presently a limit of one retail establishment in the town, and that is not proposed to change. The way the state law was set up is that existing or pre-existing medical marijuana facilities, such as the one down on Central Ave, were given preferential treatment in applying for recreational licenses since they have the experience and the wherewithal to operate such establishments. And the goal was to get as many of these online as fairly quickly as possible so that the burden on any one town is not too great, as we saw, perhaps with the rollout with the two retail establishments back in November of 2018. The other thing to note is if a town does not explicitly zone for and regulate marijuana establishments, which I have abbreviated as MEs, they are considered allowed in the zoning district most closely matching the proposed use without other controls such as buffers from schools or parks that we're proposing in this bylaw. So even without this bylaw, somebody could come in and apply for not a retail license per se, but for cultivation or a laboratory or processing. And most likely, given our zoning scheme in the town, which I'll be describing shortly, they would be allowed in the industrial district or one of the commercial districts. However, without having any zoning in place, basically all of those districts would be free reign, and there would be no limitations on the establishments other than what we already have in the zoning bylaw. Now, we do have special permit and special site plan approval provisions in the bylaw, but they're limited to more general types of businesses. So by having a bylaw, we can more specifically regulate these types of uses. Yes?
Are retail and recreational establishments the same thing?
For the purpose of this bylaw, they're considered the same, yes. There's a medical, which you could also say is a sale, so it's a retail of a sort, but in order to frequent or go to a medical establishment, you need a medical card and all this. So the retail license is for any adult over 21. So this bylaw was developed over a period of a few months. I was asked by the town manager to research the state law research what other towns have done, and develop a draft bylaw that we could bring before the town. It seems that not a week goes by where we receive a call from a cultivation establishment, sometimes in Colorado or somewhere else. You know, it's like, do you have any land and air that's suitable for this? And we've had to tell them, well, yeah, we have industrial land, but we haven't currently zoned for that specifically, and we are going to get this zoning bylaw in place soon. So, you know, if you just wait a little while, we'll try to accommodate you in a better fashion. So what we did is we also formed a recreational marijuana zoning bylaw working group, so that this would not be just the work of the planning board, which zoning typically is, because something of this nature, as you can imagine, is a little bit controversial. And you know, we wanted a wide range of stakeholders and town officials to be involved in the drafting, review, and presentation of this bylaw. So we had, you know, I'll just mention a few of the titles. We had the police chief, police detective, fire chief, town manager, assistant town manager, economic development director, park and recreation director, DPW superintendent, the building commissioner, the district health inspector, and a planning board representative involved in the review and drafting of the bylaw. So this draft bylaw was completed on March 1st, which is currently being reviewed by town council. I was told that her review will be complete by early next week, which is good because that's when we have to get the public hearing notice in. So today is March 20th, which is the first of these sessions, which is more informal. We'd like to obtain any feedback or questions. It's possible that we may not be able to answer all of the questions tonight, but anything that I cannot answer or one of the working group members cannot answer, we will, you know, attempt to answer at the public hearing itself. So the public hearings will be on Tuesday, April 9th and April 23rd of this year. So those are regular meetings of the planning board, so this room will be it'll be right here in this room. And the special town meeting vote on the bylaw is scheduled for Monday, June 10th. Also, Alan Manoy, and the Economic Development Director, will be presenting a bylaw on form-based codes for the downtown part of our business district, which will address something completely different. But both these bylaws will require, you know, a fairly extensive presentation and discussion at town meeting, and so for that reason we felt it was best to hold it at a special town meeting and not at the annual May town meeting. So what I'd like to show on this slide is I found an interesting map from Stowe, Massachusetts, which shows in shades of green and blue how different towns voted on question 4 back in November of 2016. The darker the shade of green, the more intensely it voted yes. And if you go to the blue, that's towns that voted no. With the deeper blue colors, towns that voted more strongly no. Air is a light green. It doesn't show up on the screen quite as well. I'll try to get, yeah, here's Air right here next to Groton. The Pioneer Valley, where all the colleges are, interestingly enough.
Happy Valley?
And also down in the Berkshires, but interesting. But what I wanted to draw your attention to a little more than the map, though, is what bylaws and towns we used as models to develop this one. The Pioneer Valley Planning Commission that's out in the Berkshires developed a really good model for how you can regulate and zone for this use. The town of Littleton, right next door, has a very good bylaw that we relied on heavily. They also have a cultivation facility that is currently operating. The town of Hudson, Leicester, which was one of the first 2 towns in the state to have a recreational retail facility. We also looked at their bylaw. Lowell, Fitchburg, Athol, and New Bedford complete the list of those that we used as models. Okay, so next, what the bylaw does and does not do. This is an important slide. The The bylaw does not allow more than one retail establishment at the present time. There's a very explicit provision in there that references the town meeting vote in October of 2017 that limited the number of retail establishments to one. So in order to change that, you would have to change this bylaw by a 2/3 majority vote at a town meeting. It's the recommendation of both the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission and our town council that it's best to see how these facilities will be operating, what problems they might bring to the town, what benefits, before we open the gates further to more retail. So I think that most of the towns on the list that I just mentioned are following this approach to limit the retail to one at the present time, and that seems to be working out. So this bylaw is mostly concerned with regulating the location and operation of the other facilities. I listed retail on there because there is a zoning provision for it, but cultivation, product manufacturing, testing, research, and transportation are all of the activities that go into this whole recreational marijuana umbrella. For the most part, these enterprises would be confined to the general business and industrial and light industrial zoning districts, which I will show on the zoning map momentarily. And also it's important to note that in order to get the best applicants for the town and to make sure that people that apply for these type of facilities have the resources, the wherewithal, the experience, and the responsibility to carry through, that they obtain what's known as a provisional license from the Cannabis Control Commission, as well as having in hand a host community agreement from the town that needs to be signed, needs to be agreed to between the marijuana enterprise and the Board of Selectmen. So, both the medical facility and the soon-to-open retail facility have community host agreements, which allows the town to tax up to a certain percent and to offset some of the cost of additional policing, inspections, fire safety, and all that sort of issue. So the way we've structured the bylaw is
I
that...
believe there's a question.
Oh, yes.
So the second bullet, everything
Yes.
that's bolded,
Yes.
is it possible that those are all separate locations or facilities? Everything that's...
Yes, there are. I'll be getting to the table of uses. It might be the next slide, or the slide after that will explain where each one can operate. But there is some overlap, but there is, some separation as well. Also, people just can't operate one of these with a building permit. They need to go through either site plan review with the planning board for the case of any further medical establishments, or in most cases, both a site plan review, which is looking at the parameters of the site, parking, deliveries, lighting, traffic impacts, landscaping, odor control, all that sort of issues is dealt with at site plan review. And a special permit, which is a discretionary permit, which allows the planning board to approve or deny an application if they either meet or do not meet the specific criteria. So by adopting this sort of bylaw, the planning board has more control in how they can operate. Also, by requiring a provisional license and the community host agreement up front, we have a pre-vetting that ensures that only qualified applicants will be able to run one of these enterprises. So some of the major issues that we discussed as a group and that are also addressed in the model bylaw, as well as the specific bylaws of the other towns, is they all have some provision for a buffer or separation requirement between the marijuana establishment and what's known as a sensitive receptor. The state law identifies sensitive receptors as schools, preschools, public parks, and residential zoning districts for the most part. And it was a feeling of the working group that a 200-foot buffer from any marijuana establishment to those sensitive receptors would be adequate in order to protect the interests of the town. Air is very compressed with, a lot of districts sort of in close proximity to each other. So we felt that 200 foot was the best buffer going forward. I'll be showing that on a map. Also, it shows up on the map that's on the easel. All marijuana establishments except for medical dispensaries require a special permit from the planning board. The reason we made medical require site plan only is it tends to be the least intensive, the least trafficked type of enterprise of all the enterprises that we're looking at. But all establishments require a site plan review, and most of them require a special permit. And we have specific special permit criteria that apply above and beyond what we have in the zoning bylaw now for, say, a landscaping operation or a retail store, you know, that sort of thing. Another important note is that commercial outdoor cultivation is prohibited. The state law does allow residents to, I think, grow up to 6 plants. Most people will probably do that inside, but it's, I guess, feasible to grow them outside as long as they are not visible from a public way. That's the key item. So you can't grow pot in your backyard if it's visible from, you know, the road or some other neighbor is going to see it. You know.
But for this any commercial application, no.
Correct.
No outdoor for any commercial.
Right. I know there are some of the towns in Massachusetts out west in the Pioneer Valley and the Berkshires where they have wide open spaces and hundreds of acres of farmland that, you know, you can't see from one end of the field to the other. You know, people might do that out there with permission, of course. But that is not the case in there, certainly. We do not have, you know, large agricultural fields that are suitable for that. So commercial outdoor cultivation is prohibited. So that's. And what I show on the illustration is just the border of Peroni Park, which is probably better if I stand up here. Peroni Park is right here. You see the baseball diamonds. The actual border of the park includes some natural land that borders on an industrial site. And so this is one of the industrial zoning districts, and I just wanted to measure how far it was from, say, one of those buildings to Peroni Park. It turns out to be 1,409 feet, well in excess of 200 feet. However, I do believe there is a preschool that's to the north there, so, you know. Whenever one of these establishments wants to locate in the town, we will have to do a full analysis of what's in their neighborhood. You know, we'll look at distance to any residential districts, distance to any preschool or school, and distance to any public park, which in the case of Air is mostly Peroni Park, the town beach, and I think that might be it for the town parks, the big town parks.
We include Pleasant Street in this, didn't we? Or the little park on Pleasant Street?
Maybe. The pocket park, I'm not sure. We'll have to, yeah. So now I'd like to turn from sort of the regulatory discussion to how Air might benefit from having a bylaw of this type. First of all is regulatory. By giving the town, through its planning board, greater control over how where and how these establishments will operate. I mean, I'm repeating myself with what I said earlier, but special permits give the planning board a great deal of discretion. Also, whenever somebody applies for a special permit, the notice goes into the newspaper, and also all the abutters within several hundred feet have to be notified. So if you live, you know, even if it's beyond 200 feet, if you're a direct abutter as identified by the state law, you will get a notice in the mail that, you know, you have a special permit hearing that you can come to. Economically, through hopefully increased and more efficient use of land and buildings in the industrial and commercial zoning districts, there are approximately 75 acres of vacant industrial land in Air, about 34 acres of vacant general business land. And that's not to say that all that land is developable. Some of it might be wetlands, or in the case of the industrial districts, quite a bit of that could be railroad right away, you know, and rail yards, and, you know, that's certainly not suitable. So, you know, I didn't have the time to subtract all the, you know, different types of industrial land, but there's a fair amount, and certainly I think we have adequate space for some of these. So when you have a business going, especially a business that's relatively intensive, you know, they pay taxes. So by allowing these facilities in the industrial and general business district, we will increase the commercial and industrial tax base, which generates additional tax revenues that can help the town. And also by generating new jobs, many relatively high-paying in the growing, it's not a pun, but in the growing and labor-intensive cannabis industry. I did have an opportunity to tour the cultivation facility in Littleton, and the first thing that I was impressed with was A, how organized it was, and B, how many people worked there. You know, they have a head cultivator, or I'm not sure, horticulturalist, and I'm sure he does well, and, you know, chemists, and, you know, there's testing in there. There's a lot of, you know, jobs that I imagine are well beyond the minimum wage in a facility like that. So, you know, it's not an industry that is yet, you know, fully automated or automated that much. So, you know, it seems to be a industry that generates a relatively high number of jobs per unit of economic activity. Also, there are potential benefits to the town through the community host agreement, which is mandatory for all facilities to help offset the cost of additional policing, fire safety inspections, public health inspections, and any impact that the town, you know, might, you know, have to bear due to having one of these. You know, there has to be a rational nexus, it's called, between what you ask for in the host agreement and what, you know, what they pay, but that's worked out in the negotiations. So that's how the town might benefit. Now, briefly, I want to go through the various types of enterprises. The picture on the right is your typical large growing facility. Some of these can be quite large. The indoor facilities, mostly under grow lights. It's pretty intensive when you see it for the first time. So different types of enterprises is first a retailer, which again we're limiting to one. Probably the second most common one that would be interested in coming to AIR is the cultivation or production, you know, growing facilities like you see on the right. The State Cannabis Control Commission divides these into various tiers based on the square footage of actual flowering plants. I think the lowest is like 5,000 square feet, and some of them go up, you know, to 100,000 square feet. I'm not sure what the size of the one in Littleton is, but it's, you know, it's in between. It's, you know, but there are different tiers. Also, you have product manufacturing, which would be the edibles, you know, the brownies and that sort of thing. Refined products. So those are products that would have to be refined. You know, it's almost like a restaurant sort of operation where you have to cook something or make something. Then you have testing laboratories. The Cannabis Control Commission puts a lot of emphasis on safety, and they want to make sure that the legal product won't have pesticides and herbicides and all that sort of thing. So, you know, the product has to be tested. You also have research facilities. That's stuck. It's interesting to go onto the website of one of these places that's got approved in some other town, because, you know, it's just the science is just it's just incredible in all the genetics and everything else. So I haven't heard of a lot of these research facilities so far, but I've heard that there's one or two in the state at least now, and we'll probably see more. So there's a lot of research. Craft cooperative is a type of business that is meant to modeled on the co-op sort of model, where, you know, a group of citizens can get together without having huge amounts of capital to do one of these businesses. That probably is something that will be more common in Western Massachusetts due to, it looks like a lot of that is geared more towards the outdoor sort of situation. Then you have the licensed transporters, which may not be located in a separate facility, but that's another type of license they need to obtain from the Cannabis Control Commission, because you can't just you know, if you're one of these cultivation facilities, you can't just throw the buds in the back of your, pickup truck and go to the retail place. Everything is strictly controlled, has to be strictly accounted for. And in order to transport any of this product from one facility to another, it's got to be licensed and controlled. Everything is measured. So that's that one. Also, there's something called the micro business, which is another effort by the state to sort of encourage smaller business people, less capitalized operations. There would be small-scale cultivation, no more than 5,000 square feet, and product manufacturing, but not retail. So again, this is another attempt to open up the playing field so it's not just these big firms that are operating in this industry. So that's something that we may potentially see in this town. Okay, here we get to the all-important table of uses, which I will explain here. Across the top row, we have, this is modeled on the table that's in the zoning bylaw for everything from homes to retail and businesses and industries. So the first three are the residential districts. A1 is the rural residence district, which is the northeast part of town. There's not a lot of development up there. 40,000 square foot minimum lot size. A2 is the area that's, you might think of as the suburban zoning district with a 12,000 square foot minimum lot size. GR is general residence, which you could think of as more the multifamily, denser development that surrounds the downtown. You will notice that in all of these three residential zoning districts, that all marijuana facilities are prohibited. So, I mean, it's obvious you wouldn't want these in a residential neighborhood. So they're completely prohibited. DB is downtown business, which will become the form-based code area, but the same geographic area. Again, because of feedback we received at the October 2017 town meeting, there was a strong desire not to allow any marijuana enterprises within the downtown itself. And we've kept that by prohibiting those in the downtown. MUT is the mixed-use transitional district, which is sort of an experimental multiple-use district, which includes most of Central Avenue. So it's where you could have both homes and businesses, a mix. Most zoning separates residential from industrial and commercial, but this is one where it could be allowed as a mix.
Sorry, what was the name of that again?
The mixed-use transitional district, which is sort of an experimental zone. We're seeing how it works on Central Ave. If it works well, we might want to replicate it in some other parts of town. But that's something that was put in the most recent zoning bylaw amendment. The existing medical establishment is in the mixed-use district, so they're grandfathered, so to speak. But due to the proximity of the mixed-use transitional district to the GR district in particular, we're not allowing that. And I think it would be hard for any business there to meet the 200-foot buffer. Mm-hmm. So from a practical standpoint, it's not really practical to locate any new businesses in that location. GB is general business. Oh, yes.
So the Sage business, Devon's Crest doesn't fit into that residential?
Devon's Crest does, but in the case of the I think it's called Gage Cannabis, which is Gage, over at the old Mango Grill. That is coming under the provision of being the one medical establishment that's allowed to get their first license for full retail. So they're not really subject to this bylaw. They're sort of grandfathered under the state enabling legislation for this. So, if they were citing new, if there was no pre-existing medical, they would have to adhere to the 200-foot buffer zone. But because, they were first in the door and the state gave preferential treatment to existing medical establishments, they're allowed to go in a commercial district, which they are. But you'll notice it in general business, and I'll show this on the map soon. We allow medical, again, with site plan, and all the other uses, such as, if we did allow another retailer in the future, that's what that asterisk is, it's saying it's limited to one. But, say Gage went out of business, the law says you have to allow one. So we're saying if there was one, it would have to go in the general business zone. All the other non-retail establishments, that full list that I described earlier, that takes, the cultivation, processing, transportation, the laboratories, those are all non-retail types of establishments. They would require a special permit in the GB zone. And the micro business as well. We broke that out because in the state law it's sort of a special category, but it's very similar to the non-retail here. Light industrial, I'll show this on a map very shortly, basically has the same scheme. And the industrial district, which in the past would have been called heavy industrial, factories and that sort of thing. That is here, and we wouldn't allow any retail to locate there. It's not really suitable, but it is very suitable for non-retail cultivation and laboratory and that sort of thing, being in the industrial district, because essentially cultivation nowadays is an industrial type use. It's all enclosed in a building that has to meet special controls and. And the HCS is the Healthcare Services District, which is where the Neshoba Medical Center is. There's a little bit of a medical zone up there. And again, all marijuana establishments are prohibited from located in that district. Also important to note is this, the last row on the bottom, is that marijuana social consumption facilities are prohibited in the town across the board. That would be what you could go to Amsterdam to do, go to a bar and smoke in a bar, like you go get a drink in a bar. I believe the state does not allow those at the present time, though they're thinking of opening the door to that in the future. But we felt that we're going to be conservative here and, not go down that route until wherever, depending on, what the state rules are, but we felt it was important to call that out right away. So before I get to the map, I'm just going to talk about some of the issues that the planning board can address in special permit criteria. I'll bring these all up. First of all, we can address the impacts of traffic and noise, minimize the impacts of any odors generated from the facility. One thing I wanted to mention is that this is an evolving field, and planners all across the state are, talking about, we have a problem with some odors coming from this facility. What do you recommend? And the state of the art as far as controlling odors and controlling noise is increasing all the time. And so, all the planners in the state are educating each other on these best practices.
Mm-hmm.
So we can put those in regulations. Also, goes without saying that there should be special security measures warranted for this type of business due to the nature of what they do and the high value of the product inside. We can impose conditions related to the design and construction of the facility to improve safety, security, and compatibility with the character of the area. Also, we can address energy efficiency and conservation. Many of these facilities use a fair amount of energy and water, although the facility in Littleton that we looked at supposedly recycles their water. I'm sure some new water has to come in, but for the most part, they claim that they're recycling most of the water internally, so that's good. We can also regulate the hours of operation and ensure compliance with the community host agreement, which all establishments must adhere to per the agreement with the Board of Selectmen. Also, it's important to note that the Cannabis Control Commission itself has an enforcement arm, and we've seen this recently in play in Salem. We're just talking about Salem for some other reason. They closed down the retail recreational there because they were violating some provision of it's called the seed to sale tracking system. So apparently, you know, from the time the seed starts growing to when you have the product going to the retailer, you have to track everything and account for everything. So that's so that no product is diverted to the black market or, you know, anyone else. You know, everything has to be completely controlled and accounted for. And so, you know, we've seen that, you know, the state can be very strict in helping the towns and enforcing this. So as far as the zoning bylaws of the town, the pink areas are the general business districts. Hopefully it'll show on the cursor. I think it works a little better here. Probably the most well-known general business district in town is along this part of Park Street, starting about where Dunkin' Donuts is and going up to where Tiny's is and then going left a little bit. That's general business, mostly highway-oriented business. There's also a little stretch of GB on the West Main Street going into Devon's, you know, we're out there.
Yeah.
Devon's Plaza, that's a general business district. Also by the Rotary, that's a general business district, and that's where Gage Cannabis is going to be located. It's a little bit down here, which is currently being developed with residential uses, so that may preclude any further enterprises of this type in that district. So those are the general business districts. The industrial districts show up, light industrial is orange, so it's sort of along the railroad corridor, a little bit further up this road as you go into Shirley. There's industrial land up there. There's industrial land along the railroad tracks. Much of this is probably not really usable for any type of facility, not just a marijuana facility, because it's mostly Guilford and the MBTA controlled area. And then the area that you see in this darkest purple is the industrial zone, or what used to be called heavy industrial. And I would imagine that most of the enterprises that we're talking about in this bylaw would be located right in this area right here, which is the heavy industrial district. And there's quite a bit of land out there. A lot of it is not utilized perhaps of the greatest intensity that it could be. There's a lot of surface parking lots. So it's also important to note that the wind generally blows from the west to the east. So anything that locates in here probably won't have an effect on any neighborhoods there. But what I'll be showing on the next map is the proposed buffers and how these correlate with the industrial and commercial zoning districts. So what you see here in the shade of green, and that same map is there with several other buffers there as we were studying them. But these areas that are shown in the green hatching are either the industrial or the general business zoning districts in which these types of operations would be allowed. And what you see in this green line that forms the border is the 200-foot buffer from any residential zoning district into the industrial district. And what the purple areas show are, here's the Air Shirley Regional High School, as well as the Page Hilltop Elementary School, located on this parcel, so you have to go 200 feet out from that. Of course, that's all zone residential, so you couldn't do anything up here anyhow. Down here in purple, you have Peroni Park, and that's the 200-foot buffer as you extend out from Peroni Park. There's a small purple area here, which is the Kitty Corner or something like that, preschool.
St. Mary's, right?
Kitty Depot. Kitty Depot. So that's a preschool that would have its own 200-foot buffer. Here you have the Sandy Pond Town Beach, which is an official town park, and that has a 200-foot buffer around it. Again, the zoning right around that park is all residential, so you wouldn't be able to locate one of these enterprises in that area either. So when it comes down to it, you know, I think we're looking mostly at the possibility of something in this industrial district, perhaps in the general business, I think, more likely we're going to see these facilities in the industrial districts because of the nature of what, most of the calls that we've taken so far are looking for locations for cultivation. And that requires a large building that, on a larger lot, and that's what you would find in the industrial districts. So that map shows how far you would have to be from the zoning line to operate. So, if somebody wanted to put their building right up against the zoning line, they would not be able to because it's within that 200-foot buffer. So it's mostly the back area there. And actually, I think that pretty much completes my presentation for this evening. It's fairly straightforward. I mean, there was a lot to learn. And, when I was asked to, lead the process to develop this bylaw, I thought, oh, it's going to be a ton of work. And it was a fair amount of work, but, when it comes down to the end result, it's pretty much, common sense. And, by staying out of the residential districts, by having a buffer zone to the sensitive receptors, and by targeting mostly the industrial and the general business area, I think we have a bylaw that will work for the town and protect the interests of the town and also have some economic benefit for the town.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions?
So without the bylaw, what's possible?
That's a good point. Without the bylaw, somebody could propose one of these establishments, but they wouldn't have the buffers. First of all, we wouldn't have the ability to do a buffer without having a bylaw that creates the buffer. Also, we might not be able to more fine-tune the location of, say, the possibility of future retail. And also, we wouldn't have all the extra special permit criteria that we could apply when we're reviewing an application.
So I think the big takeaway is that no bylaw would not mean no marijuana establishments. What it would mean is, going back to I think the second or third slide, is that they would be allowed to locate themselves in the zoning district that's most like the kind of business they propose, which means simply the town loses control. And the issue is that with the bylaw, we get greater control.
Right. For instance, I guess, and this just occurred to me too, is, say a small-scale medical facility wanted to locate in the downtown part of here, just down the street here. Without a bylaw saying no for that, they may be allowed to do that if they wanted to push that. So we have greater control by having the bylaw.
No, go ahead, yeah.
One more?
Yes, oh yes.
Is there a limit to the permits? It looks like there's a limit to recreational, but are there any limits to the other types?
The retail is limited to one for the retail, but
Yeah.
there are no limits for the other types of facilities. So if they can find a site in the industrial district that's suitable for cultivation, and there's more than one of those in town, well, we could potentially get more than one.
Does the town vote on allowing that, or is it just up to the planning board?
The planning board will be holding a public hearing, which we have to do by statute, by state law for any zoning change. So we'll be holding a public hearing on this on April 9th. That's when
Sorry, not the bylaw itself, but if somebody wanted to come in and open up an establishment, does the town vote on each of those, or is it just up?
Oh, no, that would be, the town gets to vote on June 10th on this bylaw, and there may be a few minor amendments to it procedurally that take place, but we're hoping that the full bylaw will be available next week for the public to take home. And basically, at June 10th, the town would have to vote by 2/3 majority to approve the bylaw in order for it to go into effect.
So, Mark, I think the question is, who decides, if somebody makes an application, who decides whether or not it's allowed?
That would be ultimately the planning board. Yes, the planning board.
So-
And the selectmen too, I shouldn't,
Oh.
because this is.
Oh, right, because the home code,
Yeah,
the host.
the host community agreement has to be negotiated with the Board of Selectmen, and that's also by statute. Whoever, in towns with a town council or a mayor form of government, it might be the mayor's office, but in our town, it's the selectmen. So before they can even apply to the planning board, they have to have the host community agreement in hand. So
And the provisional.
And a provisional license from the Cannabis
And
Control
those are
Commission.
pretty high bars, I
Right.
suppose.
Yes, so, once they have those in hand, they can work with the planning board through the special permit process. And the planning board has the ability to make sure they have all the documentation, they meet all the requirements. We hold a public hearing, we get a butter input. And after that, the planning board could approve or deny it based on how they meet those. The planning board usually imposes conditions of approval on certain permits, has to be traffic control or, additional stop signs, whatever it needs to be to make the situation safer and more compatible with the surroundings. So the planning board will be the ultimate authority, or the last stop, you might say.
If you remember from that chart of the proposed table of uses, we mean, every time you saw SI means site plan review. Bare minimum site plan review. Everywhere you saw an SP means in addition to the site plan review, is the special permit. And we moved erred on the side of caution. We had more that required special permit rather than simply a site plan review, because we understand this is brand new. It's a venture for all the towns in Massachusetts, and the thinking was, let's err on the conservative side to start, and we can see where we are. And the town has an opportunity to review the consequences of these actions. And it may be a few years down the road that we may need to revise, and we have legal methods of doing that through town meeting, et cetera. But to start, I think we're taking a very conservative posture.
Yes, I would agree. Yep. And as these establishments start to come in, we'll be looking to see how the process works. We found that with other elements of planning in the town that we need to tweak the zoning bylaw, for open space development or subdivisions or whatever it is, retail, not retail marijuana, but just stores in general. We might want to tweak the landscaping and that sort of thing. So we're constantly reviewing the efficiency and the efficacy of the bylaw and getting the results that we want. And so that certainly will be the case with this bylaw. So I want to thank you all for coming out, and if you would like, everybody is welcome to come to the Planning Board public hearing on April 9th in the same room. And again, the town meeting vote will be on Monday, June 10th. It's 7 p.m., I think, over at near Shirley Regional High School. Yes?
Also on June 10th, I think Mass Development wants to deal with Vicksburg Square yet again, so that might be a third warrant article.
Oh, okay.
Just as a heads up.
All right, thanks everybody for coming out.